even though you're out, because it was indoctrinated into you for so long, the threat of destruction at God's hands, do you still feel that threat?
Not anymore. I mean, I'm very much an atheist now. But, the first thing after leaving was that I had to rebuild my life. And that meant that everything that I had been taught or believed was now wrong. So I had to find out who I am. I didn't know myself, and inevitably it led to quite a destructive path at first. Went out and partied and sex, drugs, and rock and roll, dude. But yeah, you can easily end up on quite a destructive path, and it's not until later that I've suddenly got to this age where I've not got a particularly good job because I didn't get to go the further education. I was straight out of home, straight into earning any money to support myself, and even my relationships very late to the party, really, with figuring out sexuality, figuring out who I'm suited to, finding anyone who will fully understand what my situation is. So it was only over the last few years that I really got to a point where I feel I am comfortable with who I am. But the problem with the shunning and like you said to me, I look anxious today. I mean, yeah, I'm anxious because just doing this podcast with you could have repercussions. I hope it doesn't. I hope that my loved ones understand the situation, but you just never know, and it's always a risk. But that's the weapon they use. That's why I need to do it. That's why I need to be here.
What's the cost of your activism, isn't it? Because you're getting such an important message out and preventing further victims.
Absolutely.
I'm curious then, if your entire being is invested in a belief system and then all of a sudden the deck is cleared, what does that do to a human?
It messes you up. It's difficult.
Are there various stages of adapting to that?
You just wing it. To me, I mean, I've been on this weird journey through life. It's there's so much. I mean, the things we're telling you today are just little highlights. It's just mentioning where we come from. But every day, you'll do something and you suddenly think, oh no, that's not what I believe now. That's not how I think. You've got to completely analyze your mind, and it drives you crazy. And it wasn't until I got professional help. I mean, and that happened by accident. I was at a doctor's surgery and the doctor went, as I said goodbye, he said, sit back down. He's like, we need to talk. And that was it. And yeah, it just all came out, but I'm getting there.
You say it all came out. What came out?
Everything, just everything about my belief systems. There's a lot of things in my life that have happened that I wouldn't discuss, but there's also a lot that's happened that I would. And it was only then realizing that most of the problems I'd suffered in life had the origin of this cult. That's where it all came from. And it wasn't until then it really hit me that, this really damaged me. This really has shaped my existence, and I wish I could turn back the clock and go do it differently. I wish my mum had never spoken to that witness who lived next door to her, because that's how she found it. I wish my dad had never gone into it. But you can't change what's happened. You can just change how you view things, and you can't. I mean, one thing I always say is you can't change what's happened. You can just change how you react to it. So for me, it's about just letting other people know to be cautious of this group, and anyone who's struggling in it. There's people like me who've been through it, like John, who have been through it, and we're here if you need to talk. Or we can find you professional support. We can find you local support groups. And to me, that's what it's about. I'm not here to tell people how evil Jehovah's Witnesses are or any of this stuff. I don't believe that. I think most Jehovah's Witnesses are sincere. I just think the organisation themselves are really harmful, really damaging, and something needs to change. I think the legal situation has to change. They have to make it illegal to shun. I think that's the first thing.
And to make sure they report child sexual abuse.
And to report abuse.
Was there a particular day or an event that triggered you to think this is all false?
Not so much. It's a really weird thing because as I was growing up, I would say I didn't really believe it, but it's a very difficult thing because you kind of do and you kind of don't. It's complete, like, it screws your mind up. It really is a tough thing to get your head around because a lot of the time you're thinking, well, this can't be right. Why would God make me who I am if I'm not allowed to be who I am? If God's created everybody, why is it so hard to follow his instructions? Why is it so hard to be what he wants us? Why don't he just create us perfect? It makes no sense. And you end up with this spiral, and it goes round and round and round and round. And then you're taught, well, having these kind of thoughts is a sin. You just can't win. And, and like, earlier on, it's quite a flippant comment, but how are you sane? Don't know. I really don't. So it's
like a mental prison.
Yeah, it's a gradual thing as well. And I didn't really fully believe it. And for me, it was just, I was never going to stay as a Jehovah's Witness. I wasn't the right personality.
Once you see the background, as you were talking there, it reminds me, if you don't mind me using an illustration, of the film The Wizard of Oz, the original film. We all know, I don't want to spoil the end, but they're all going to see the wizard because he's going to give them strength, courage, whatever. They get to the wizard, and what they find is Toto the dog just pulls the curtain back, and it's not a wizard, it's an old guy with the machinery. And what is happening is Jehovah's Witnesses, like us, believed God was behind the machine. God said this, God did that. We've had the curtain pulled back, and once you've seen behind the curtain, it's no good going thinking, but no, it is Jehovah. It is Jehovah doing it. It is Jehovah. The curtain's been pulled back. We can't go back there. So now we know it isn't the truth that we absolutely believe.
And what brought you to that moment?
My mental health did, actually, believe it or not. I didn't have any doctrinal difficulties. I actually got to a point where I was seen by two elders. This is exactly true. I was sitting on a chair. They were on a settee in a house. The two elders were telling me I had to give up my daughters. They actually one of them said, give up your daughters and stay an elder. So I had this choice. And at that point, I had what was a strange thing. It was like an out-of-body experience where I seemed to I left my head and I was up in the corner looking down on me. Now, I've spoken to a counsellor since then, and they say, no, that's extreme stress. They know exactly what happened. So I was looking down on the three of us, and I suddenly came to and thought, this is crazy. I'm not doing this anymore. And it was like a switch was turned off in my head. At the time, I even thought it might even be God doing it, saying, you cannot cope with this anymore. So I literally just said, I'm sorry, brothers, to the two brothers, shook their hand and left. There was no argument. You won't be seeing me anymore. It was just, I knew my mental health had reached a point where if I carried on, I'd probably be in an institution. Fortunately, it didn't get there. It didn't get to that point. And I remember leaving the front door, shutting the front door, and jumping and punching the air. And I felt, this is absolutely true, I felt a physical release of like pressure going. And it was an elation that I had not felt in years and years and years. And I didn't even fear telling my wife. I thought, I've got to go home now and tell my wife when I'm not going anymore. She completely understood.
Can you just describe walking in and telling her what happened?
I did tell her.
What did you say?
I just said, I said, you're never going to believe what happened to me. I think I may have been having a mental breakdown. Well, I think what it is, she could already see the pressure because she knew that I was having visits from elders saying, don't see your daughters. She was already having some sort of doubts about certain things herself. But as I say, I supported her for another 10 years. She was the most loving and supportive wife to me, didn't put any pressure on me. Neither did I put any pressure on her to leave. It has to be an individual decision. And neither did I do that with any of my other family. But I can just say the personal relief of knowing that I got off that hamster wheel. Because when you're in a routine, Jehovah's Witnesses keep you busy. You're on that wheel going round. going to the Kingdom Hall meetings twice a week. You must go out preaching. You must do other things. It's like that. You don't actually get time to say, why do I believe this? What? And as soon as you can step off that wheel, you just get time to think. You can start investigating. You can start looking on the internet now about, well, why did they used to say this? Why do they now say this? How come that's changed if it's God's organisation? And you can start looking and doing research. And that is the internet that's brought a lot of people away from Jehovah's Witnesses. But the first thing that happens is they have to recognise there's something not right here. I don't know what it is, and that's what started me off. Something's not right.
Are all your family members out now?
They are all out.
All
the only
out.
people who are in is the abuser and his family. Heavily in. Very heavily in. And you know what? Jehovah's Witnesses even went to see him in prison. Because in prison, he was allowed to talk to other prisoners about his beliefs, which is fine. But Jehovah's Witnesses would then calculate how many hours he spent, and that would be added to the congregation's figures to be sent off for preaching.
Bloody hell. Wow.
They visit him, but not you.
Yeah.
So if everyone's out, your wife came out.
My wife came out simply because she saw a program that Chris mentioned about the governing body.
Yeah.
The governing body, one of the governing body gave a talk about child abusers and saying that people who say that we abuse, they're apostates. And my wife said, well, my daughter's not an apostate. My daughter was abused. The lying. And she actually saw through the governing body member himself, and it's what he said knocked her out.
Wow.
Yeah.
And how was she after coming out? Was there a lot of discussions, philosophical discussions?
She's bitter.
Yeah.
She's worse than me. She's become an atheist. She's way past me in her hatred for Jehovah's Witnesses and all they stand for.
Really?
I'm not at that point.
Yeah.
And I think, we've, as Chris has said, we don't hate. We certainly don't hate Jehovah's Witnesses. We know that it's a cult. It is a cult. I'm very comfortable in saying that it's a cult now. It's mind control, and if you're allowing people to control your mind, they're trapped. They are trapped. I'm sorry about using illustrations, but one of the best illustrations I heard was how they catch monkeys in Asia. They use a coconut. They get it. They put a little hole in. They attach it to a wire or a string, and they put a little treat in there. And a monkey comes along and can just get its hand in the coconut. And then when it grabs the treat, its hand is expanded. Now it can't get out. Is it trapped? Well, it is. But all it's got to do is let go of the treat, and it can get out.
But it won't let go?
It won't get let go. Oh. Jehovah's Witnesses are trapped like that because they want to live forever. They want to see their loved ones again. They want paradise. They want to play with the furry animals. So I'm going to believe that. And people like myself and Chris come along and say, look, you really do need to think. No, I'm believing it. So once they've got their hand round that treat, until they let go, they're not going to get out. So they're trapped, but they're not really trapped.
What is that afterlife belief?
Well, it's funny because John just sort of mentioned seeing the loved ones again. That's all to do with their belief that if you die, you get resurrected into this paradise earth. Which there's a few technicalities to it. I mean, if you do die and you're not a believer, then you will come and get judged. I mean, I'm a bit rusty on the details, but you have this chance of coming back to paradise and living forever. So a lot of them, and most people have obviously lost family members to death, and there's this constant belief that you're going to see them again, and that's that is the treat that they're going to hold on to. And you've spent the last.
You're going to be reunited in a paradise with your deceased family members.
And if you've held on to that, if you've lost a loved one and you've held on to that for years, I'm going to meet them again. And then suddenly you get to this point where you're thinking, this organisation, it's not quite right. It's a hell of a thing to let go of, that belief. One thing when I did leave, and it really struck me that, I'm not involved with this anymore. I can go and get on with my life. I thought of all the loved ones I'd lost and didn't mourn. I didn't mourn them because I was going to see them again. So it's like they've all just died again.
So when you realised it was false, that was one of the big things that hit you, that you're not going to see your loved ones.
Yeah.
What other things hit you?
Well, the other thing is all the loved ones that I hadn't lost, but I just hadn't socialised with because I was a Jehovah's Witness and they weren't. My grandparents, that hit me pretty hard. I was like, I've just, all my life, my grandparents have looked at me as this kid in this group who they can't send Christmas presents to, they can't send birthday presents to. I'm not allowed to really socialise with them all that much, but we just saw them occasionally, but they lived at the other end of the country.
So how did all of those family members treat you when you came out?
Well, one thing I did pretty soon after leaving was to move to be closer to my grandparents.
Yeah.
And that was great, and for the last few years of their life, I got to know them. And I'll always treasure that.
Did they try and make up for lost time with the gifts?
Well, my nan was pretty stubborn. She'd send us stuff anyway.
Yeah.
It's quite funny, actually, because one thing I'll always think fondly of my grandmother, she used to love sending us Halloween stuff. And my parents hated it because it's all, ghosts and ghouls and it's like monsters and, and of course that's satanic to them. So, yeah, that was always quite amusing. I'm sure my grandmother did it just to stir the emotions. But, yeah.
So are both of you guys expert witnesses in Jehovah's Witness court cases?
I've not been involved with court cases so much. I feel that there's better people for it, people who have perhaps got a personal case they can take to it. So I tend to for me, it's just activism to let people know and to get the word out there and to support people like John who might need a platform to get their story out.
What court cases are they involved in?
I've been involved in some court cases where I've been called to explain about what are the beliefs of Jehovah's Witnesses, how might they affect a certain person. Might that affect the one case I was involved in was about the statute of limitations, where someone who was brought up as a Jehovah's Witness and was abused, but because of the beliefs of Jehovah's Witnesses didn't want to testify or didn't want to come forward because you're testifying against your brother, your fellow Jehovah's Witness. So sometimes it's only later when you stop being a Jehovah's Witness and you can look back, then you can say, he did that to me or she did that to me. Then you want to say something and it might be that you're out of time. Well, knowing that Jehovah's Witnesses are are such a cult that might have an effect on the timing of when someone might be able to say something happened. So I've done that, and I was involved in the case last year as well, in the Royal Courts of Justice, where this person was held the Jehovah's Witnesses became vicariously liable. So
how does it feel to get up on the stand?
It's nerve-wracking, but when I was a Jehovah's Witness, I passionately believed it 100% and acted genuinely in its interests. I now passionately know that it isn't the true religion 100%, and I'm just as passionate in being honest about the deficiencies of it.